All right. Hello, hello. Welcome to another episode of the Onchain Heroes pod. I'm Ashton, one of the co-hosts here at Onchain, and super excited to be chatting with a good friend, Jennifer Roebuck, and she's going to give a little bit about her Onchain hero story, and we're going to talk about all the great things she's been doing in the Web3 space, on the consumer apps side, the art space, and the NFT scene, and even into the AI ventures these days as well. So, yeah, why don't we go ahead and get started? Jen, if you want to go ahead and give us a little bit of background as to how you got into the space, how you came on chain, and kind of your journey so far.
Hi, Ashton. Yeah, happy to do that. So I started working in Web3 about 5 years ago, and I was in the fashion industry focused on digital commerce. And I met someone, well, it's kind of twofold, really. I have a lot of degen friends who were in the venture capital space, still are, and they used to talk to me about Litecoin and Ethereum and Bitcoin at parties. And at that time, it was, you could basically buy things on Silk Road with your digital currency, and so that was a lot of the information I had. And I didn't really become probably curious until I met somebody who was building an on-chain smart contract loyalty platform. This was in 2019, and I started exploring it, and I think it was still too early for mainstream consumers. But that was when I started reading more about blockchain, decided to get a certification through the Oxford program. Like there's loads of these programs you can take, right? And that was really helpful because I understood the technology. And then I just became obsessed. I was like, crypto is the future. All of this digital IP, digital creativity, culture, like this is where things are headed. People will take control of everything, right? Whereas you have all this centralized platform narrative that, I'm not the first to kind of talk about this, but there is a lot of truth to how much creativity has been commoditized and how much power creators can take back. So I really came at it from the creator lens initially, and that's because in fashion, we work with creativity 24/7. We were either on photo shoot sets, we were talking about storytelling as it pertained to product, we were exploring like how would we tell stories differently, what platform should we use, what visual medium should we use. And a lot of time and energy goes into the creative craft, right? Whether that be music or film. And fashion is probably one of the few places that isn't fully commoditized, whereas music and film have been through, the platforming centralization kind of effect. And you see that today. So, and I, at the time I had, there's a woman who we were producing a large kind of celebrity content series with, and her and I were sitting in this huge venue for 6 days filming. And the whole time we sat there talking about how we should put this recording artist on chain or that recording artist on chain, whatever. And there were a few labels there and it came up. And anyway, so fast forward, I ended up freelancing with her for a year with a recording artist who, is perfect for on chain. And at the time everything was NFT, PFP, right? Bored Ape. And so I had like a pretty rapid fire experience because I had one of the things I had to focus on was business development. So I met every L1, every BD team. And at that time, people were just like throwing money at you, like, you're famous, can we give you money? Can we start a fund? Can we do this? Can we do that? Um,
Easy back then, huh?
yeah, it was crazy, right? And so I ended up at all of these Web3 parties. And simultaneously, I started mentoring at a Bitcoin side chain accelerator. And that was interesting because on one hand, I had all of this very shiny object stuff happening around me. Here's a recording artist. What could we do? How do you create IP in the space? How do you retain the purity of what the artist creates while extending into Web3? And then on the other hand, I was meeting entrepreneurs who were building like mortgage solutions with blockchain. Or there's this one woman who is unbelievable. I think she's still in business. Her business is called Pickle, and she's a firefighter slash plumber, and she had this really cool Web3 product, which was all about helping firefighters find secondary employment because firefighters are underpaid, and a lot of them train as tradesmen and women, right? Plumbing, electrician, locksmiths. And so she created a blockchain platform that actually helps them all find secondary work, and it's all managed through smart contracts. It's really clever. So people like that were kind of coming into my life. And so then I became obsessed. And so I then helped Fossil Group, the global watch organization, with some Web3 advisory. Plus, I was helping with kind of wider marketing transformation. And we built a huge diesel experience, which is really cool. And then I ended up at a Web3 venture fund, Metaversal. Spent a couple of years there, and we built a lot of things, a lot of IP native brands, invested in a lot of art. And that's how I became connected to Lumen, and I'm chairing Lumen today. Brilliant team, super exciting business, and has been around actually for some time. Pretty thought leading in not only Web3 but tech. That was a very long answer.
That's all right. It was great. Thanks. I mean, it just goes to show like the amount of different types of thing that you've done in the space and the amount of like touch points you've had with both on the brand side but also on the creator side. And I think just in general bringing a lot of different types of people on chain over the years, which is great, which is really cool to see. Um, and just goes to show like the breadth of experience you have in the space, being around so many years, even myself being around since like 2017. You
A
just
long time, right? Like,
Yeah, it really adds up. And it's like,
yeah.
and like 8 or 9 years now, actually it feels like a whole career. It feels like 30, I guess.
I think that's early though. 2017, you're in the OG camp for sure. I'm in like 2019, 2020. I mean, COVID, loads of people moved into Web3, right? It was like
Mhm.
thing to do. Um, I guess it was still early, like we're still early. But I mean, I was already 20 plus years into my career, right? So I think I was a late adopter.
That's right. I would still say pretty early for sure. We were still early, right? So
Well,
that's all right.
apparently now we're still early. So
Yeah, always, always. So I guess like with that, like what made you stick around in the Web3 space so long? Like maybe not go through like, I mean, maybe you did go through like burnouts, in the space. What made you stick around to Web3, and what makes you still excited to contribute to the space to this day?
yeah, you definitely do get burnt out. I think like the sheer amount of information coming at you, right? And the speed, like those two things are repeatedly cited as the causes of burnout. And I believe in that. I don't know. I don't think there are many, if you can call it an industry. I mean, it's a tech industry, but then it has multiple tech industries within an industry. So it's hard to kind of define it. But I think there are very few industries that have like geopolitical, finance, creativity, tech, culture woven into one. Usually you're in an industry and there's sort of like one or two lanes, right? Like if I go back to fashion, you have creativity, you have consumer, you'll have tech and finance, but it's not fashion's not like geopolitical. It's not, crypto is such a contentious topic and innovation and product and um so I think that's one reason is it just really appeals to my brain. Like I've always been hyper curious. I love the intersection of things, right? And that's I think how I've always built what I've built over the years. Like if in fashion I was focused on fashion and tech, and in telco I was focused on culture and telco. And even starting my career in consumer finance, it was consumer finance and tech. So I've always looked at like the intersection of A and B or A, B, and C. And then I think the second thing is it's just so progressive, like culturally is progressive. The remote working, distributed work, accelerated work, the underlying tech is fascinating. Like blockchain is, I've heard it described as like the trusted layer of the internet. I think that's probably right. And so that's how I see it. And so it's like, if you want to be in the future of the internet, you need to be at the intersection of blockchain and X, and you need to just be patient because it is going to play out that way. But like, how long do so I've always sort of like questioned. When I get burnt out, I question it, and then I engage with other industries. I realize how one-dimensional they are and how straightforward they are, and so to some extent, that's great because it's easy. It's easy to bring something to market in food or in fashion or in packaged goods, right? And I'm a consumer expert, so that's where my pattern recognition and my first principles lie. But being part of the future of the internet and understanding where society is going, I think is really compelling. So that always brings me back. And then I step away, and then AI suddenly takes over Web3, and then it becomes exciting again, right? And then you're going to have quantum. You're going to see so many things come into the space.
Yeah, true. Makes a lot of sense. I think when you're someone maybe on the more ADHD spectrum side of things, like especially I am myself, I think
Yeah.
like you find new ways to engage, you find new things to do, all new types of communities. Obviously, as I mentioned, like new ways to use the technology for different purposes.
Yeah.
And then I think because it's still evolving so much, yeah, it kind of just keeps you coming back around to different stuff. Even if you get burnt out on one thing, there's always like 10 other things you can go and try out. And
Yeah, you can move into
you can go.
gaming, right? You've got gaming, art.
Mhm.
There's like hospitality applications. I think all the AI stuff, agents, and then the agentic networks. And then within that, there are entertainment agents. I mean, the number of tokens I've come in and out of just purely, not even for speculative purposes, just total entertainment. It's like, if my husband's sitting around with he has like one of these VR headsets, and he's like blowing up bad guys on his PlayStation. And he's like, "What are you doing?" I'm like, "Oh, I'm messing around with some token, and there's this AI entertainment agent who's now, going to do a recording with Grimes, and she's fully autonomous, right? And she's tweeting, and she has her own graphic engine. It's a game, and it's a hobby, I guess, for me. Like, that's how I see it.
Yeah, makes sense. There's just so many crazy things that happen on a daily basis. It's insane. Um,
Yeah.
and and you mentioned being more of like a consumer facing expert, right? And I think um, we're going through the process of creating a Web3 consumer apps report right now, and it's
Mhm.
clear that like there are a lot of types of applications in the space that are consumer facing, but not a lot of them that actually get you know larger adoption of a consumer base. And
Yeah.
I think you've seen consumer products that have scaled outside of Web3, and then you've seen what it's like in Web3. So have you seen anything that's like really properly scaled to like the mass adoption, kind of category? And how can we increase the amount of products and consumer facing apps that actually um, get that adoption, right? And what kind of advice might you give like a founder or someone that's building something like that?
Yeah, it's interesting. I haven't seen anything on the DApp side, right, go mainstream. I think there's been a couple things like Dracula, which is the Web3 version of TikTok. A lot of people would probably reference like Phantom or MetaMask, but they're wallets slash becoming a DEX, right? I don't know. I read something really interesting the other day, which is, I think, a great way of summarizing it, which is if you're expecting to replace an existing business model with Web3 and then it's going to scale, that's where you're making your first mistake. And so I think what a lot of founders are doing is they're saying, well, if I just put this on chain and if I incentivize the crap out of it and if I use smart contracts to create more efficiency, then my app's better. And all of a sudden, consumers will gravitate to me because they'll appreciate the efficiency and the incentives. And the reality is they won't because the incentives are totally speculative. And consumers don't care about your efficiency, right? They care about their efficiency. So you have to think about something new. You can't just recreate an existing business model. And so I think it is going to be hard for Web3 apps to scale because it will take some time for people to come up with those new models. And consumers are creatures of habit. So as much as we all talk about how much we really hate social media, right? I hate Instagram. I dislike this. I dislike that. We're still there. We're still uploading content. We haven't stopped giving our data away. We don't care because it's passive and it's convenient. And I'm not personally feeling the downside of giving my data to somebody yet. It hasn't caused me to lose value in any way, right? And equally, I haven't had too much identity theft or any of these problems. So yeah, so I think new models need to surface. I do think there are some interesting things like Blackbird and hospitality, which is working reasonably well in New York, and that's a booking app with an incentive program and a community angle, and that seems to be doing well. I don't know how big it's become, but so there's sort of like green shoots, I guess, is the best way to describe it, but we have a ways to go.
Right. I'm glad you mentioned Blackbird. They're actually a featured case study in our in our report because
Yeah.
they get it. It's a new model, but like it's built for something that I think should work, and it brings that value to the consumer in a new way. And it's something that you know before, like, maybe they wouldn't have cared about as much, but now that they see the value that they're providing and they're getting some of that value back, I think it's like it's clear to the consumer, right?
Yeah, it takes time.
These apps, right?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of this takes time. You use something once. Does it help you access something with ease, or does it bring value? Or with repeat use to something bring value, in which case Blackbird probably had to wait until if I put my old app marketing hat on, like many years ago, we launched an app startup after our restaurant. Our second startup was a hospitality marketplace. It was mobile first. And the only thing in mobile that matters is DAUs, MAUs, and your monthly cohort retention rates, right? That is and was the path to recurring revenue, which is this lovely, precisely modeled revenue stream that venture capitalists like, right? And it de-risks upside. Um, so I kind of see Blackbird in that sort of realm, right? Like, will you become a consistent user? What value does it bring? And how much time are they prepared to wait out that process of acquiring and retaining? And it sounds like they have the capital and they have the network and they have the patience to do that. And as long as they can do that, I think it's a great solution. I also think they've created something that doesn't exist yet, right? So going back to the first point, I'd love to see it come to London. It's a shame it's only in New York, but
Yeah,
I will wait.
agreed. Same here, Lisbon's. Yeah, for sure. Would be nice to try it out. I met the founder and Eat Denver actually, and
Oh, cool.
or one of the founders, and he was like super excited about it. Just outside the venue, like showing people it, tapping people in. I'm like, that's how you do it. You go there and you start showing people it, and I think they're doing it in the right
You
way.
have to be really hands-on with these things. I mean, a lot of people, I think, underestimate, and I think this is why consumer hasn't scaled and why VCs within the Web3 space haven't put money behind consumer, and it's because it's one thing to, like, create infrastructure, drop a token goes up to X, VC exits at 12 months, everyone wins, and then the token does what it needs to do, and the infrastructure scales through ecosystem growth. And that model is like proven, and there's now 100 blockchains, right? Which is like, I think, too many blockchains, but that's how many exist. I saw that announcement the other day. Um, in consumer, you have to spend money to acquire users. You have to be on the ground. You have to literally meet people on a one-to-one basis in a catchment area that's very tight, and you have to wait for network effects to take off in order to de-risk your high acquisition cost, right? Which is what venture capitalists don't want to fund, because everybody knows that in this market, acquisition is incredibly expensive. And so for that reason, people, I think, underestimate how hard consumer is, because as a founder, you're literally out there almost like canvassing on the street sometimes. I mean, I look back at like many years ago when we opened our restaurant business, and granted, it's not exactly the same thing, but my husband would sit there with a clicker. How many people are coming by at lunch, dinner, breakfast, and he would just sit there for 10 hours to make sure that every single location was worthy of signing a lease. And in Web3 infra, that's not happening, right? That's just like some guy's like, here's a smart contract. Let me get a community. Let me stand up a Telegram. Let me see if I can get, 1,000 EVM devs to make something. It has network effects kind of built in. Consumer is harder.
Yeah, makes sense. Yeah, some already hot takes there, which I'd love to get into in this next kind of section. We like to call the roast. So, um, I think looking at maybe the art side as well. Maybe not just consumer, but you mentioned like having so many blockchains or whatever, but like
Mm.
also like there's a lot of NFT brands and a lot of like artists out there that I think are struggling in this point in time because as you mentioned, it's not as easy as it was a few years ago to get capital or, launch an NFT and get, massive amounts of funding like overnight. Right. So yeah, any hot takes you have on the art and the NFT space or what people can do to like break out of the harsh reality of not having enough money floating around.
Yeah, the market is tough again, isn't it? So I think the NFT space is intermittent. It feels like there will be something novel that launches with a great team who just know how to market themselves and how to create excitement irrespective of where the market is. And we've seen that, right? From 2021, 2024, so on. So that has happened consistently. And even during bear markets, we see great projects. So that carries on. I just think, people have already been burnt, right? NFTs were basically the meme coins of 2021. It's easier to raise capital with a meme coin. You can create a meme coin on Pump Fund in 3 minutes or less. There's no KYC. There's no need to kind of even get a community other than you need to just shill consistently, and whoever screams the loudest with the best ticker wins, right? So I think that that's really hurt the space as we probably all agree, like, it hasn't been value creating, it's been value extracting. But, within that and within art specifically, so if you follow, like, Fellowship or, I think Super Rare to some extent, Tezos, Zora, that whole ecosystem is actually getting stronger because the artists have, I think, over time found their voices and their creative handwriting, and you have this kind of like group of people, albeit it's a bit niche, who have spent, almost a decade learning how to create art using GAN models before large LLMs were even mainstream. And so as a result, the work is just insane, in terms of the quality, the distinctiveness. Um, and I don't know, there's like a lot of mainstream institutions that are starting to really focus on this art. The Christie's AI art auction was a big deal, was highly contentious because people think that these models are trained on public art, right? And so it's like the aggregate of the work of the internet is now what shapes the output of these models. But actually, the artists that work with this technology don't really leverage that. They have their own way of using a model to create output that's distinctively ownable by them. Um, and so I think art is very interesting, and that's still quite strong. And a lot of these projects and a lot of these artists are still selling work for healthy rates, I would say, whether it's ETH or Bitcoin or the Bitcoin art ecosystem is still strong. Ordinals is strong. Um, so that sort of, I think, carries on. I don't know if it's because there's this like red thread through crypto and art is the culture, right? It's like the easiest way of expressing creativity because it's visual. You can hold it in a wallet. It can sit on chain. There's a degree of provenance attached to it. Um, so it's fascinating to see, and there's a lot of physical meetups. I mean, in London, one of the co-founders of Fellowship has a property. He's an entrepreneur who exited a couple Web2 businesses, right? So it's done very well. So has space to host people. And a lot of these top tier artists will come to his space for their drop, and he'll have a physical event, and the drop takes place on, their marketplace. And of course sells out because everyone's there to support the artist, right? So it's nice. There's a couple groups. 100 Collectors is a global group. There's Glimmer DAO. There's quite a few DAOs. They're very active. So yeah, it's interesting. I mean, advice. I don't know. I think if you just have something that you're passionate about, you create it, market it effectively, believe in your vision, don't follow the model everybody else follows, and chances are you'll probably succeed because what you're bringing to market is just high quality, right? I think high quality still stands above everything else, and there's still so much garbage, right? Like meme coins. I mean, at one point there were 64,000 meme coins launching a day, and then about 1,200 of them would bond on Radium, and then about 200 would make it. And I think now we're down to like 24,000 meme coins a day. So it's still a lot of meme coins a day at launch. And I only know that because I am a holder in a particular project who they're focused on like automatic agent trading. So I get stats every day on what's happening within Pump Fun.
That's cool.
Yeah,
That's a good stat to see.
It's super interesting, right? Like,
Quite interesting.
I think we'll be better off when we're down to sort of 500 tokens a day, right? And actually like 50 are bonding and their quality, like not to say like WIF or Pepe, but on the cultural side, again, like WIF was a thing. Like it was a group of people, it was a movement, it was funny, it was something you could bond over. Now you have Trump, Melania. It's just turned into like the Kardashians on chain. That's how I see it. And I really don't like the Kardashians. So,
nice. Yeah, that's a good tagline. We used that.
Kardashians on chain.
Yeah, that's perfect.
I think Kanye West is going to
stay a little bit longer.
Yeah. Well, when you're on X and you just consume all this information, we're all in the same pockets on there, right? Once you're in crypto Twitter, you're in this tiny funnel. And apparently Kanye West is going to interview Andrew Tate. So
courtesy.
That's what's happening. Yeah.
Yeah. Not to dive into that more. Maybe
I'm staying away from that.
Future roast.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I think you mentioned a lot of great points there. I think as in this space, quality really shines. As you mentioned, regardless of whether it's a bear market or not. So I think we need to just stop comparing ourselves to like this other project that's super similar, or stop comparing ourselves to like what's already been done or what's already out there, but trying to like really prove that this is new and this is why it can work and it should work. And I don't know if you've seen like great ways of people finding whether it works or not, like validating with their audience, like, is this going to work? I don't know if you have any like recommendations of like how you've done it or how you've seen projects do it. But yeah, I'm super interested in hearing,
Yeah. I mean, I think unfortunately it's like a bit of a cliche, but communities. I think people who build a community around them very early, even if it's like 10 people in a Telegram who can give you feedback and who can support you, whether that be through tweeting, retweeting, helping you make content. That seems to still be the best way to go about it. Again, like some of the DAOs I'm in, they are intentionally small. And there are, if I use art again as an example, there are artists who come in and share their work and share their go-to-market. And artists are often very interesting to follow because what they try to do, in addition to making great art, is they try to release the art through an experience. And there's only so many ways you can make a digital experience an experience. So like Sam Spratt is a really good example where he just launched a project called Masquerade. And it's like an IRL experience. It's a digital experience. There's multiple things to collect on the way. He's gamified it. He's one of the artists that really sits at the top in terms of his tactics that he uses when he drops a piece of art. You're never going to just experience a traditional marketplace art release. It's always going to come with some theater and something else that really connects with his fan base. And so stuff like that is really interesting, and you could take that and you could borrow from that, right, across multiple verticals as one example. Those are things I see working, but at the end of the day, most of it's community and your network, because your network is, your network is your network. Like, a lot of people talk about, like, surface area, expanding your luck. I do think that that's very true in life, and I think it is very evident in Web3 for sure.
So having more people around you that are lucky in general helps you be
Well,
lucky.
I mean, your network is your luck, right? It's like if you're I don't know, we should all help each other, reciprocal kindness, things like that, I think pay dividends over time when you meet people, and people reach out to me on X sometimes and ask me. I had one guy write to me. I follow him. He's pretty interesting, and he just wrote to me one morning. He said, "Hey, I'm writing an article and I'm just like, I'm stuck. You seem like somebody who could help me with an entry paragraph. This is what I want to talk about." And I was out with my daughter having coffee, whatever, and I just went, "Oh, yeah, well, here's how you could write it, da, 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 da." I sent him something back. Yeah, I don't know why he chose to write to me, but, there's things like that all the time that I come across where somebody just needs help or they need a connection, and honestly, like, I always take time to help, and then when I need something, I just think that's life, not necessarily Web3, but I think in Web3, because it's such a small industry, like, we all every conference I go to, I see the same 30 people, right? So that's
It's a
it's
different
even more
crowd.
important.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's even more important to be kind, to be respectful, to help each other. That's how we succeed.
Yeah, for sure. I really appreciate when I get to go back and see the same faces, like every year at ETH Denver, for example, and it's like, here's what I'm doing now, here's what I'm doing now. And it's
Same.
like, especially when you can then follow up with that person and be like, but actually, could you help me out in this thing? Or, could we establish a partnership? And
Yeah.
if you know that that person is like building cool stuff for years, you're like way more likely to be like, all right, yeah, happy to help, or, let's do this. And then things come together super quickly, right? Because
Yeah.
there's that level of trust that's been built up over time. And so, yeah, just I think putting positive things out there in the universe, it typically tends to come back when you need it the most. So to fully believe with that. uh,
Yeah, I agree. So I don't know if that answers the question, but I think that there's a lot of community trust that goes into building and experimentation to try and validate what's gonna work, and then roll it out from there. So it's cliched, but it works.
no, definitely makes sense for sure. I think it's like just even if it's not like a community in general, just having that small group of people that like test it and give you feedback, especially if they're like your target audience, let's say, and they're like, oh yeah, I would improve this thing. I'm looking for that thing, you know, even just in an unorganized like Telegram chat, I think you can still get great feedback, even if it's not.
100%. I've seen so many of those, and I often jump into them because I'm curious what somebody's doing. Like, I want to know. There's a guy, I can't remember his name, he created offline protocol.
Hmm.
You could mint your own protocol name, and it's a little bit like a .eth, which I finally let my .eth lapse. I was like, "I'm not gonna renew. Is that bad?" It's like, I'm gonna regret that because Ethereum is gonna come back. But,
You should get your dot on chain now. You should switch.
is that a thing? Dot on chain?
Yeah, dot on
Okay.
chain with Unstoppable. I have
Okay.
mine right here
You have
actually.
yours?
My Ashton dot on chain.
Oh, okay. I need something. I've removed it from my ex. I feel naked.
Yeah.
Buddies after 4 years of dotty thing.
Yeah.
Um, but anyway, offline protocol, super interesting. I still don't know what they do, but 2,000 people flew into that Telegram just to hang out, just because they wanted to be offline.
Yeah. Right. There's a common thing that these people
Yeah.
who we need, right, to go and touch grass from time to
Mhm.
time. So,
100%. Every day. Yep.
still important for sure. Um, so I guess moving into what we call like the on-chain signal, right? So there's a lot of noise out there, as you mentioned before, and there's there are some high quality projects, right, to be found within that. And
Yeah.
is there anything that you use like tool wise or process wise that helps you like figure out what's important or keep you focused on like a daily basis, for example?
I mean, I don't know about daily. I think it's hard to be focused on a daily basis. To your point about having ADHD, I think a lot of us in this industry do have some semblance of ADHD, and not officially, but I think I do. I mean, I read Masari, Milk Road, X. I like a lot of the thought leaders, albeit there aren't as many as there used to be. The timeline is lower quality for sure, but those remaining I think are really interesting. Um, Quite a few of them are actually former Masari research analysts, which is interesting, and so publish their takes. On Telegram, there's about 6 thought leaders that have their own channels, and I follow them. One's called Alpha Signal. I can't remember the other names off the top of my head. And then I think Grok is pretty impressive. So if I've had a really busy day, I haven't had time to read anything, especially lately when President Trump is blowing things up and God knows what else is happening. I can just ask Grok to give me a summary of the day. What are the top 20 themes? What are the drivers of those themes, and what should I know? It writes me a nice summary. So I think that the fact that Grok can leverage all of the information on the X timeline is pretty helpful. You don't really get the same from Telegram, but you do get on Telegram like the top 20 crypto news outlets. So I'll scan those because they have everything in like sound bites, which is pretty
Mm,
nice.
nice.
I'm probably over-informed, uh, which I don't
Well, I think you should be in this space. I think that a lot of people lack some of those things you mentioned, like they lack that process or they lack the understanding, like, oh yeah, I could just ask Rock on a daily basis, like what happened and what is that. So I think even those things you mentioned are going above and beyond. And yeah, hopefully, people in those positions of leadership and decision making within a company can find better ways to be more informed. And at Onchain, that's kind of what we're working on, is like, how can we help them be more informed without having to put in so much time and effort into like building their own process and building their own things that they can do, but just going and logging into something they can trust and just seeing what's important and then getting back to work, right? Or getting back to building what they need to build. So yeah, it's really interesting you said that. I think a lot of those culminations are kind of just what we're working on building. So
Yeah, well, that's amazing. I think that'll be a huge help. There's so much noise in the space. Every day there's a new mainnet launch, right? There's a new airdrop. And I know there's a whole group of KOLs, right, who spend their time earning money on airdrops and they want to compete on yaps, and there's just that whole layer of activity. On a personal level, I try to stay one layer above that because I'm more interested in like what are the big directional changes that are going to make meaningful impacts strategically, not are you yapping because you want an airdrop and you want to, stake your yaps for X. And I think a lot of products are built then around that layer and then they don't scale because that layer is a very insular, small proportion of society, right? So like friend tech, and then there's a new version of friend tech all the time. And it's like, it's just going to eat itself. So going back to your earlier question is like, if you're looking at consumer and you're looking at, ecosystem growth, things like that, you have to be one layer up. And so any service that could help with that, I think would be amazing because you have to kind of create that yourself right now.
yep, fully. That's a lot of work to sort through and know who us, right? And like,
Yeah,
how do you even? Yeah, I mean, it takes a lot of time, and
totally. Yeah,
a lot of people get scammed still and hacked. And I think staying on that, I guess, lower level where you're like in all of the communities and you're like looking at all the different apps, it's like you're less likely to focus on what's important, and you're less likely to, or I guess it's easier to like fall for something that maybe you shouldn't be trusting, right? Um, when you're
well,
in the
there's that. I mean, who to trust just generally with media, and then in crypto, who to trust is something high quality, low quality. What are the signals that you need to obtain to understand if something's legitimate? A lot of experienced investors actually don't go into any project until they can see some kind of pattern recognition or track record. And they might miss out on upside if you're thinking about making money on tokens, for example, like liquid investments. But in parallel, you probably de-risk because you can see whether there's intent behind a project. And that's because there's no scrutiny around people who move into the space. And I've seen now a lot more LinkedIn people, profiles, entrepreneurs, if that's what you want to call them, creating projects and shilling on LinkedIn. And it's fascinating. People on LinkedIn, especially those of us who are in Web3 and we have an X persona and a LinkedIn persona, the comments are flat out rejection. People saying, that's not the kind of stuff you bring here. Take that back to X, right? Like there's a time and a place for low quality stuff. And in an ideal world, it wouldn't exist in, again, that macro layer of business. But it's accepted in other circles, I suppose.
Yeah, maybe subsets and
Yeah.
small circles that are still small. Like I think we have to keep in mind that the pie is still, yeah,
Small or like geographically specific.
yeah,
You can shill something in a offshore social circle if that's what you want to do, and see if people want to put money into something that doesn't have any grounding. But most of us in the space now know better, right?
yeah, for sure. So I guess just kind of wrapping up a bit. Are there any final like takeaways or pieces of advice? I know we mentioned a few of them already. That you'd give to maybe a founder, maybe a leader that's working in a space that, yeah, I mean, they could be struggling with that focus that we mentioned, or they're in the path of like they just can't break through and get that next level of growth that they need. Um, and yeah, I don't know, any final takeaways you'd give to someone in that position?
Well, again, if I focus on consumer, I think building outside of Web3 is really the only thing that's going to help you scale or solving a meaningful problem for those in Web3. I like to use Phantom as a case study a lot. I have no involvement with Phantom, but I think that the way that they realize that brand is their moat versus features, and that's because features come and go so quickly. There's no defensibility in a feature, especially if you're dealing with open source tech. So if you're a founder and you're in Web3, and this isn't like a bias comment because I think it's now proven to be true, and you don't have marketing bench strength and you don't have a brand strategy, then I don't think you can win. So for me, that's one of the most important things. There was this whole thing on X around CMOs, crypto CMOs, talking about how much it sucks to be a CMO in crypto. And it's true. And that's because most founders in crypto think that a social media manager is a CMO, and they're just not. So the industry has a lot of maturing to do to understand what marketing actually is. And it's not just KOLs. So my message to founders is take branding seriously, because that's one of the moats you have in open source. And in AI, you're seeing that play out now, where the brands that have invested in awareness, like OpenAI, like Anthropic, they're taking the lion's share of users. And there's lots of small projects that come and go. And while their ARR might be very compelling, they don't have much shelf life because it's all open source. So the next business who can come and compete on a single feature will show up in a matter of days or hours, right? The only
Very
thing you
true.
have is brand and awareness.
Yeah, yeah, and who relies on your product? I guess that like core subset of people that are like
Yeah.
diehard users, and hopefully you can grow that at scale. And um yeah, if you're if you're basically if your brand, as you said, can like actually shine through everything else out there and be like something that is trusted, that you can see everywhere, or that like they're in.
Yeah, there's a team. Yeah, there's a team, they're doxed. There's some sort of customer service. I mean, it sounds trite, but that's where we are today, right?
There's there's a
Sometimes,
big lack of just customer service. Yeah, I agree.
like on Coinbase, can you actually find someone? The answer is no. So I won't use Coinbase for that reason. Or why would I put capital on a centralized exchange if I can't speak to anybody? And this is kind of where we're headed. So I think building trust and visibility and consistency is worth more than people, I think, understand.
Yeah, for sure. Awesome. Well, yeah. Is there a specific place where people can follow your journey? Should they follow you on X or LinkedIn or both?
Either one. I mean, on LinkedIn, I'm definitely less crypto centric just because my background is consumer. So I tend to look at cultural trends, brand trends, tech trends. And then on X, I'm just hanging out, really. I haven't been a thought leader on X. I haven't had time to do both, so LinkedIn has been my focus. But yeah, either one. Come say hi. You wanna
Yeah,
chat or
and Lume
collaborate.
as well, right? Check out Lume.
Lumen, yep, Lumen Prize, Lumen Studios. Lumen Prize is, open now, so if you're an artist, please enter your work. It's growing every year pretty significantly, actually. It's a great prize, and top artists around the world are in it, so it's a good community. Speaking of communities, that one's very strong.
Mhm. Yeah, I can tell just by I mean, I haven't been, like, super involved in it, but, just from the outside, I think it seems like, really strong. So,
Yeah, definitely.
um,
High quality.
yeah, awesome. Very cool. Well, thank you so much again for joining. Thanks for listening to the Onchain Heroes pod for you out there, and, I hope to see you in the next one, and, maybe we can have you back at some point in future, Jen. We hope to keep this podcast around for a while, so,
Amazing.
thanks again
Thanks
for
for
sharing
having
your
me. Of
journey,
course.
and, see you around. See you around on chain.